Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, family. Today, I'm out here in Virginia right now, but today I'm going to be coming with the part two of identifying the biblical Israelites or the true Israelites of the Bible. I know it's been a while, since I did part one, and I know, honestly, man, I wasn't expecting it to reach, that many people who it reached, but I'll praise to the Most High Yah. So I'm gonna pick off where we left off last time, and then we'll kind of, just go into it some more, man. And I'll just hit some things. So first, I'm gonna pray, and then we'll get into it. All right. Thank you, Father, for just everything you do. Thank you for this Shabbat that you allowed me to see. I ask that you just bless my voice. I ask that you bless this video, Father, to reach who it needs to reach and awaken who it needs to awaken, Father. I thank you for just protecting me, covering me. I ask that you bless Israel right now, Father. I ask that you just bless the scattered sheep, Father, and just continue to keep us. I thank you and I praise you, Father, for everything you do. My Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in the Shamayim. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And do not lead us in hard testing, but deliver us from evil. For kingship, power, and glory are yours forever. Hallelujah. Amen. Hallelujah. Oh, man. So, hallelujah. Man, first names first, man. Before we get into it, last video, man, I had, just what's the word I'm looking for? Just people commenting, man, just with some foolishness, man. And so I do want to give you a warning, man. If you comment on this with that foolishness, man, you will be blocked. Your comment will be deleted. Because there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to have civil discourse if we disagree. With love, of course. You know what I mean? I feel like, not I feel like, but I know we have a lot of Israelites, man. Well, let's just say this: we got a lot of folks walking around here claiming to be Israelites, man, but their heart are wicked. Their heart is wicked. You know what I mean? And they have doctrines of devils, man, for real. And not even just the Israelites, man, but even a lot of these racist Gentiles and people of other nations, man, coming on here and just saying racist crap, man. You will be deleted. But if you disagree with anything that I say, let's go into the scripture with it. You see what I'm saying? Don't just get on here trying to bash. Let's have a civil discourse. Because of course I'm not perfect and I don't know everything. But I am a student of the word. And if you're a student of the word and we have a disagreement, let's be as the Bereans and search out the scriptures together. And let's do it with love to see if it is so, to see if it is true. I don't mind that. I don't mind correction. You know what I mean? So I'm just giving you that forewarning before we get into it, man, because I'm not with that. I promise you. I'm not with that. You getting on here talking crazy, you're going to be deleted. You see what I'm saying? Your comment going to be deleted. Not you going to be deleted, but your comment going to be deleted, and you're going to be blocked from this page. If you get on here saying crap like, oh, you delusional and all this and all that, but you're not providing sources, shut up. Either source up or shut up. That's why I like what my brother Will, son of Yah, says. Either source up or shut up. Because as long as we got sources, we got historical accounts, we got scriptures, we got biblical text that is proving our point, then if you can't dispute that, then just shut up. Just be quiet. Because we are supposed to worship him in spirit and in truth, right? Not just in spirit, but and in truth. So all truth matters, right? Even who his people are, that truth matters. So I just wanted to get that precursor, man, because there was a lot of cats saying some crazy stuff, man, and I'm not with that. And this ain't the channel for that, for no strife and for none of that. And I ain't turning the comment section off. The comment section gonna be on, but the ones who are sitting here acting crazy, you're gonna be deleted. Your comments gonna be deleted off of here. So I just wanted to get that out there, just to let y'all know. Don't come over here with that foolishness. So let's get back into it, man. Let's start off where we left off. So let me share my screen real quick. And then we're going to get into it. All right, there we go. All right, so where we at? Oh, here we go, right here. All right, y'all. So the last quote or the last historical text that we left off on was dealing in regards to the Igbo tribe. I'm sorry. And the Igbo tribe, we all know, it's very heavily documented that they descend from biblical Israelites. Even the the current inhabitants of the land, even they recognize the Ebos as biblical Israelites, right? Their oral history and all of that type of stuff. The Ebos have been known to be biblical Israelites for a long time, even before they knew about the Ethiopian Jews, which we went over that quote already, right? But this was about Igbo slaves. This was quotes from the Moravian church missionaries. This was their writings. It said, first quote, whereas the Igbos do not tolerate one uncircumcised slave among them. Only when he is circumcised do they accept him as worthy human company, right? So talking about circumcision. And we're going to get into circumcision. We're going to get into some fun facts about circumcision on the next slide. But circumcision is very important because circumcision is the sign of the covenant, right? And the Igbos and most West African tribes are heavy on circumcision. And that didn't come from Islam. That was a practice even before Islam, right? The next quote, among the Igbos, they, being the priests, are taken out of a sort of people whom they call living sacrifices, right? So that's like the Nazarites, right? And like the priests, they're living sacrifices. They serve Yah. They are in the service of Yah, right? The Levites weren't given inheritance of land because they were after the service of Yah. But speaking about these Igbos, they take out these people, the priests, and they call them living sacrifices. These very ones live celibate, right? So they live clean and without property, right? Without an inheritance and at the expense of others, right? Where the tithes come into play, right? And have liberty to take from others all of what they need, and nobody hinders them. Like the Pharisee among the Yahudim or the Jews, they let their hair grow, and the use of scissors is not permitted to them. So it's just like a Nazarite, and it's also just like a priest, right? And they are able to take what they need from, whoever. They live at the expense of others, right? And they have liberty to take from others what they need. What does that remind you of? That reminds you of the law of tithing, right? I know the church, the current church, the Christian church or the Roman Catholic Church, they've made tithes money, and you got to give a tenth of your income. In ancient times, in the original context of tithing, it was bringing your first fruits, right? And it was bringing, the firstborn, animal, whatever it was, cattle, sheep, goats, whatever the case may be, and also your first fruits, bringing that to the temple, right, for the Levitical priesthood, and also for the widows and the orphans, right, so they can be sustained as well. That's what it was about, right? So that was the quote from the Moravian church missionaries, just attesting to the practices of the Igbo, the Hebraic practices of the Igbo, right? So let's go to the next slide. Fun fact. 3 fun facts. During the slave trade, there were more circumcised slaves than there were slave masters and slave traders, right? Because we know, a lot of the European nations, they don't believe in circumcision like heavily. You know what I mean? Now, you have a good amount of them that are circumcised that adopted the practices and stuff like that. But for the most part, that was not a custom of theirs, right? But you had more circumcised you had more slaves that were circumcised, than slave traders, right? Also, Western Saharan men have a higher circumcision rate than those in the land of Israel today, right? And like I said, this did not just come from Islam. This was before Islam, right? Because circumcision is a sign of the covenant that was made, right? Which was in Genesis chapter 17, verse 10 through 14, right? And so that's another testament as far as who we are, just by the indigenous Hebraic practices that we have, the indigenous Israelite practices that our people had in West Africa and also in Spain and Portugal and these places, Central Africa, all of that. We had Hebraic practices that were ingrained in us, right? Because of who we were. So that's just a testament of who we are. All right, let's go to the next slide. Israelite migration into West Africa. Shout out to this brother right here. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I'll definitely give you a shout out at the end, brother, as far as your YouTube channel. I have it on my last slide. But this brother right here brings out some good sources, right? And this one is titled Israelite Immigration into West Africa. The source is Topography and History, Political, Social, and Natural of French Africa by John Raynel Morel, 1854. So this is an 1800 source. You're going to find we're going to do a lot of sources that date back to the 1800s, 1700s, and etc. And when you and see, the closer you get, to the current, to the present time, the sources start to change a lot of different things as far as who the original Israelites and who the original Jews were. But if you go back into like the 1800 sources, 1700 sources, 1600 sources, you'll start to see that they start to identify these people as Negro, as Black, you know what I mean, as African looking. You see what I'm saying? But anyways, I digress on that point. So I'm going to read from the left, the notes. History has recorded the date and cause of the Israelitish immigration into West Africa after the destruction of Jerusalem, but the immemorial establishment of the Sinite Jews, who in the whole extent of Barbary are mixed up with the Berber population. So they're saying that there were Jews that were mixed up with the Berber population, and there was also an Israelite immigration into West Africa, right? You're talking about sub-Saharan Africa where everybody is just Hamites. No, yeah, there was an Israelite immigration into West Africa, and we gonna just because it says that they mix with the Berber population, and one thing we have to understand about the Berbers is that because I know we see a lot of quote unquote white Berbers today, but you have to realize that was due to the heavy influx of the Slavs who were made slaves, right? The Turkic people who were made slaves, they mixed with a lot of those northern Africans and those in Tunisia and Morocco and all those different places in northern Africa. And in Northwest Africa as well. So now you will see a lot of those people who look white and Turkish because of the heavily influx of the Turks who were taking their slaves into Northern Africa. They mixed with the indigenous people, right? That's why you see some who look white, then you see some who look a little mixed, like Latinos almost, and then you still have Black among those populations. And we also have to realize the reason that we're seeing less and less Black, quote unquote, Africans or melanated Africans amongst those Berber populations and different things like that is because of a process called ethnic cleansing. Um, Ethnic cleansing is very prevalent. It's even happening to this day in Mauritania, right, where they persecute those who are melanated descent and melanated looking, and they force those people. They take their land, they take their property, and they force them more to the south. That's what they're doing in Mauritania right now, that ethnic cleansing. And that's been going on for a long time, ethnic cleansing. So that's why you see populations like Egypt, Morocco, Mauritania, Tunisia, all these places in North Africa that look white, even in Israel, even in Arabia, all of these different places over the course of time, they've had a lot of ethnic cleansing. In another place you see that is in Brazil. If you look into the history of Brazil and South America, specifically Brazil and a lot of those countries where the slaves were taken in South America, what happened was around the 1800s, the government started incentivizing Europeans to move over to Brazil and to South America to white out the population because the majority of the population were the Blacks, the ones who descended from the slaves, right? They actually dominated as far as in numbers. They were actually outnumbered the Europeans who were there, and so what they did was they incentivized millions and millions of Europeans to come over and to kind of white out the population. And of course, there was a process of ethnic cleansing. And just to give a testament to that, like as far as the ethnic cleansing in Latin cultures, especially, and it's still kind of like that today, but especially like in the 1800s and the 1900s in Latin culture, it was encouraged for Blacks to mix with those Europeans, and they would call it cleansing their bloodline. So let's say you take a Black grandmother, right, and she has her daughter, right. She will. So the Black grandmother would go with a European male. Then of course you would have a mixed child, right? 50% European, 50% quote unquote African, right? And then they would encourage that child to even go with a European as well. Then what you would have is a I forget the word for it, but basically they're 2/3 European now. and then they would encourage that child to go on and marry into a European and procreate, and that baby would be 100% European after that, right? That was and they would call that cleansing their bloodline. So the ethnic cleansing is real. So just because you see a certain population in a certain place today does not mean that they originated in that place, right? I don't care where you're at. We can even look at North America, where we're at, right? Of course, most of us aren't indigenous. Now, of course, I know we had a lot of black people who were indigenous, who were here before Columbus came. I'm not arguing that point. But what I'm saying is the population you see in North America today, if you would go to New York City, you will find people of all different nations in New York City. These people are not, although they might have been living here, their family might have been here for 100 years. They're not native to this land, right? But they migrated to this land, and they ethnically cleansed the nation who was here before them, which was the Native Americans. And where did they push them? They pushed them further west. Even in Utah, it's majority white. Those people are not indigenous to Utah. They took that land from the natives and they pushed them further west, and they pushed them onto their reservations and different things like that. So it's the same thing in Africa and Egypt, in Morocco, Tunisia, and Israel, in Iraq, in Iran, and all of these different places. It was a process of ethnic cleansing, because when the basically when the Medes and the Persians around that time, and the a lot of the white tribes started conquering different places as far as the Middle East and Africa. What they would do, you know what I mean? Because they would think they were superior to those Africans, and what they would do is they would kind of push those indigenous people, further south or further west. So that's what we see today. So I sorry to go off on that tangent. I just wanted to make that point. All right, so I'm gonna finish with the source. Of all the races known to me, the Syrians and certain West African tribes are those who delight most in proverbs, would lead us to suppose that it forms the foundation of this immigration from the east in Syria, right? So it's saying that these tribes, these West African tribes, who delight most in proverbs, that the foundation of the immigration was from the east and from Syria. Okay, that's weird, because West Africans are just supposed to be indigenous to West Africa, and they're just supposed to be Hamites and all this type of stuff. But it's saying that that there are West African tribes, certain West African tribes, right? All West African tribes are black, right? We're not talking about North Africa or Northwest Africa. We're talking about West African tribes. But it's saying that they immigrated from the east and from Syria, which Seleucus has related in these words. Afterward, the Phoenicians, some for the sake of lessening the pressure at home, others from motives of ambition and curiosity, built Adrumetum, Hippo, Lepis, and other cities on the seashore. Numerous Jewish migrations occurred during the persecutions of Adrian during the Roman time. And in the 3rd century, these immigrants formed independent tribes in the Hejaz near Medina and near Mecca, and their religion spread in Yemen. If we may believe the Arab historians, most of the African Berbers and Arabs professed the Hebrew faith in the 7th and 8th centuries, and among the preaching of Mohammedanism made no way amongst them. This would appear to explain the phenomenon of the Jews forming till lately. A 4th century population of Algiers and more than 4/5 of that of Iran, right? So again, you got the Berber populations, and also you have, certain West African tribes as well, who they are saying descend from Jews and who migrated from the east and from Syria, especially during the 3rd century and especially during the times of Emperor Hadrian. All right. This is another source as far as the Israelite immigration into West Africa. The source is the modern part of an universal history from the earliest time, volume. I don't even really know how to read Roman numerals, so I ain't even going to say it here in front like I do. But this is from 1759. There's the authors right there, you see. So I'm just going to start from the top. And this is written in Old English. It says, dispersed. Among those vast herds of them which are dispersed through this great continent, there have been since dislodged from their high. And so when you read in these, the F's are really supposed to be S's. Dislodged from their high and almost inaccessible mountains, for their frequent ill offices to those princes and fitting with their revolted subjects, or siding with their revolted subjects, I'm sorry, and have been brought into due subjection and laid tender tribute to them, since which time they have lived dispersed into several provinces of that empire and have made but an inconsiderable figure in it. There are some who call themselves original Jews of the posterity of Abraham, who pretend to have formerly come in colonies and have settled themselves in Egypt, Abyssinia, and along the Niger. Along the Niger, okay. And their lads are more numerous. Yeah, and their lads are more numerous and considerable than the two former. So it's saying that they are more vast and considerable than the two former, meaning Egypt and Abyssinia. So they're more numerous along the Niger, which is in West Africa. And they're in the last in the and their last are more numerous and considerable than the two former. But those who have come and are here still in the greater number, and such as refuse what is it refuse themselves in these parts, either after the destruction of Jerusalem in in the dispersion of the Jewish nation by Titus Vespasian, mentioned in a former chapter, or who fled from other persecutions. So we see the map right here where the Niger River is. All this is West Africa. So you have Mali, Timbuktu, you got Guinea, it's touching a little bit of Sierra Leone, you got Benin, you got Niger or Nigeria. You see what I'm saying? So this is and then Ghana and all that is below it. But this is where the Niger runs from. This is West Africa. These are all West African tribes. If you do your DNA, you'll find parts of all of these different countries, or most of them at least, in your DNA. Like I have, I want to say like 8% Mali. I got Guinea. Um, got some Sierra Leone. I don't think I got no Ghana, but I got Nigeria. Most of it is Nigeria. But this is where it says that they were dispersed to, and it says along the Niger. That's where they were more numerous rather than in Egypt and Abyssinia, right? So these are sources. This is from the 1700s, 1759, right? So we're not making this stuff up. Next source, West African Countries and Peoples by James Africanus Horton, written in 1868. I'm just going to read the highlighted portion. The Israelites' descendants or the inhabitants occupying the central portion of Africa parted forward seeking shelter to the south and west. A part, namely those from the east central, excuse me, it's kind of hard to read because the sun is hitting the screen a little bit, but just bear with me. Namely those from the east central crossing the Bainu or the Jalaba branch of the Niger. I'm gonna skip down to the highlight portion. Protected from incursion on the north by the Bainu River and quietly settled between the Great Niger and the Old Calabar River. They remained in peace and grew from one generation to another in idolatry, but still leaving tangible practices of proofs in the form of their religion of the Judaistic origin of the inhabitants. So they're saying the inhabitants of the Great River Niger and the Old Calabar River, right by the Bainu, this is all in West Africa. It says their origin was Judaistic origin. Okay, well, we making this stuff up. This ain't real. These Africans are delusional. We was kings. You know what I mean? I mean, it's funny. It's funny when you have these historical sources to back up your claims, and you want to have civil discourse with people and just say, hey, this is what I found, and this is what it's saying. And even when I do my DNA, even when I do my history, it goes back to these places where it says the Jews were, and these people were of Judaistic origin or Israelite origin, right? So I descend from these tribes. These people will, gaslight you. They'll make racist remarks. They'll say, oh, you're just delusional. But it's like, okay, I'm delusional with concrete sources and concrete evidence. And then I'm going into the Bible to back it all up with prophecy. But That's just a part of the great deception. Because when people can't prove you wrong, they result to insults and they result to gaslighting. That's why it's just laughable. And honestly, it's not even worth your 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 energy. You see what I'm saying? Because you'll never be able to convince somebody of something they don't want to be convinced of. And a lot of times these people know these things, but they don't want you to know these things. You think our enemies don't know who we are? Come on, man. Let's be for real. All right, next slide. A History of the Jews by Solomon Grazel. I'm gonna just read the highlighted portion. And this book was written, I want to say, in like the early 1900s or either the 1800s. But it says other Jews from the former population of Cyrenaica fled completely beyond the reach of Rome into the desert of the south. Such is the explanation how the Sahara Desert first acquired Jewish tribes, toughened by a fighting tradition and possessed of physical characteristics which it is said still make them approximate very closely to the original Jewish population of Palestine. Okay, so this was so of course you know the Jewish Roman wars, or what they call the Jewish Roman wars, which were in North Africa, you know, Mauritania, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, all these places, where a lot of the Phoenicians were as well, right? And Phoenicians were Canaanites, right? And the Israelites always dwelt with the Canaanites and mixed with the Canaanites. We know that for a fact. But then it says other Jews from that population of Cyrenaica fled. So they fled from where the Romans could reach them, and they fled to the south. So we know the north. You know, we know North Africa, where Morocco and Tunisia, all these places is. The south directly is West Africa. You'll hit Mauritania, you'll hit Senegal, you'll hit, you know, Ghana, you'll hit all these different places, right? Burkina Faso, all these different places in West Africa, Nigeria. This is where you would go, which is beyond the Sahara Desert into the south, right? So this is where these people fled to. This is what this is saying. This is what this source is saying, that these people fled, and it says that these people who fled into West Africa, right, south of the Sahara, right, these people, they were toughened by a fighting tradition, which made them resemble very closely the original population of Palestine, or the original Yahudim population of Palestine. So these Jews that went into West Africa looked exactly like the original population of Palestine. You know how we know that to be true? The Lachish reliefs. When we see the Lachish reliefs, which we went over in the previous video, the Lachish relief shows these Israelite men with woolly beards, woolly hair, and it's showing that their body, you know what I'm saying, is, you know, built like us. You know what I mean? Now, of course, we can say, oh, that's built like anybody, but you can't deny the hair. You can't deny the hair, and you can't deny the features, right? So we see that. We see that in the Lachish relief. You know, we also see that when in archaeology, you know, where it said that their craniums were of Egypto-Nubian origin, right? So these Yahudim, right, who they found in Lachish, and who they found at, you know, the different burial sites, they said that their skulls were Egypto-Nubian. Why is that? Because they came out of Egypt and Ethiopia during the Exodus. They came out of Africa in the Exodus. They went in 70 souls and they came out just, you know, in a great number. They were mixing with the natives of the land. Like I tell people, if the Israelites wasn't black before they went in Egypt, they sure was black when they came out. Because we can also see that in the Egyptian reliefs where we seen the Israelites making bricks. They were dark, they were melanated people. They was black. They were what you would consider black. They was my exact skin tone. And they had the exact same hair and they had the exact same features as us today. So we see that. There's no denying that, right? So next source, Jews in West Africa. This is from the modern part of a universal history from the earliest account of time, compiled from original writers. I'm not sure what the date is on this source, but you can look it up and find it. But I'm going to go with the highlighted portion. There are some who call themselves original Jews of the posterity of Abraham, who pretend to have formerly come in colonies, and this is basically saying the same thing as the previous one, but this is a different source. But it's saying the same thing. It's agreeing with the other source. Who pretend to have formerly come in colonies and have settled themselves in Egypt, Abyssinia, and along the Niger. And these last are more numerous and considerable than the two former. So the Niger, they settled more in the Niger, right? But those who came and are still in the greatest number are such as refuse themselves in the parts either after the destruction of Jerusalem and the different persecution or the different yeah per yeah I think this is persecution of the Jewish nation by Titus Vespasian, mentioned in a former chapter, of who fled from other persecutions under the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and since under the Christians. Hmm. As out of Italy in 1342, Spain and Portugal. Wow. So not only did they come during the times of the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus Vespasian, but they also came out from the persecution of the Christians out of Italy and Spain and Portugal. We're gonna get in Spain and Portugal, y'all, because honestly, Spain and Portugal is like the smoking gun of this whole thing. And I'm gonna show you how it directly relates to me. But let's just get into it. Next slide. Um, West African villages inhabited by the tribe of Judah. This source is a collection of voyages and travels by John Barber, 1688. It's a 1600 source. All right, so let's see where I want to start at. Let's see. You know what? I'll just start at the top. A description of the Lower Ethiopia. The custom of the fitting in the open air at public ceremonies or to deliberate on affairs of, let me say this, fate, or to hear causes may be derived from the Jews, as we read that the kings, I don't know those names, the kings Japhet and Arbab sat on their thrones in the place of Samaria, near the gate. In ancient times, the towns were not too large as our capital cities in Europe, which can hardly be, uh, can't really see that word, which can hardly be, excuse me, y'all. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time saying this, but y'all can see that word. Basically, by the product of the lands for 100 miles about them. They were then small, inhabited but by a small number of laborers and husbandmen, sufficient to till the ground about them. Thence it is that the sole tribe of Judah reckoned 115 such towns within its precinct, each of them living some villages depending on it. The market was general rendezvous for all affairs was the general rendezvous for all affairs at the town gate. All public concerns were managed, especially in the days of the patriarchs. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, but this is so. It says that these towns were inhabited by the Jews, and this was in Lower Ethiopia, right? Lower Ethiopia would be West Central South Africa, right? So this is the description, and it's saying that it was inhabited by the sole tribe of Judah. So that's interesting, very interesting. These are Hebrew customs amongst the West Africans. The source is a new and accurate description of the coast of Guinea, written in 1705 by Willem Bosman. When the customs of women is upon the female sex, they are not only esteemed unclean, right, when they're going through their cycle, esteemed unclean and separated from their husband, but they are not suffered to go into another man's house, at least to lodge, and are consequently obliged to remain in a small hut near the father's or husband's house. The children are not circumcised anywhere on the Gold Coast but Accra. That's Accra, Ghana, y'all. But whence the custom of holding women unclean and circumcising of children should be derived from our own, I cannot tell, to carry it up as high as the Judaic times, seems to me too far. Those several Europeans favor this assertion, urging that the Europeans, urging that the Negroes, still retain several laws and customs which favor of Judaism. Right. So he's basically saying that um, these customs that they have, as far as with the woman on her cycle being unclean and children being circumcised, um, many Europeans assert that these Negroes still retain these laws and customs, which favor Judaism, right? Which come from Judaism. And I'm gonna continue. As the last mention of the honoring of the moon at the time when the Jews begin their festival, the marrying of the brother's wife, and several more, which seem the fame, which seem the same in effect, as well as the names of which here are the festivals which occur in the Old Testament, or the feast days, and the new moons. But all this cannot, in the least, incline me to their opinion. I should be more easily persuaded that they had all these from the Mohammedans, whose religion is a mere uh, rhapsody of the Christianity, Judaism, and I don't know that last word, y'all. I can't read that. But this author is of the opinion, right? So basically, what he's saying is he's of the opinion that they got all these customs from the Mohammedans, from the Muslims. But he's saying no, many other Europeans that they assert and they urge that these Negroes just retain these customs which favor Judaism, and they already had these customs beforehand, right? So he doesn't agree with it, but he's saying a lot of Europeans do agree with it. But again, that's neither here nor there. Their opinion doesn't matter as far as where they think it came from. It was already there before the Mohammedans, because what did they do when they first came? The Mohammedans, when they first conquered a lot of these places in Africa, Western Africa, western of the Sahara, like Mali and Timbuktu, they burned all the books, right? They burnt all the history. That's what they did. You know what I mean? So we had these customs beforehand in our writings, and we had writings of these things and these customs, right? Like the Zad dynasty and all these Hebrew dynasties in West Africa, right? But the Mohammedans, they came and burnt a lot of our literature. But this is the thing. Some of them still remain. Remember, we read the source as far as those in Nigeria still having a Torah scroll written in Aramaic, burned in parchment. Remember that? That didn't come from the Mohammedans. That's something that they retained. But I digress. Next source. Uh, African Jews or Judaism, the religion of ancient Africans. This was the source is the African Repository and Colonial Journal, volume 31, written in 1855 by Harvard University Press. Right. So I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start on the left side, starting it again. It says, again, we meet among the prophets and teachers at Antioch. One Simon who was called Nigger, right? No, that says Niger, but no, it's pronounced Nigger, black. We have here at least one evangelist and four of the early disciples and teachers of Christianity who were Africans, and as successors to this first generation of disciples, Africa supplied her full quota of Christian bishops and teachers. Origen, Bishop of Alexandria, was an African. Julius Africanus, as the name seems most obvious to import, was a native of the same country, and we shall venture to assume that Athanaeus and Dionysius, celebrated bishops of Alexandria, and Cyprian, bishop of Carthage, were of the crisp hair and thick lip. What's crisp hair? This is crisp hair and thick lips, or in the thick lip. I'm sorry. No doubt, an African soil is capable of producing men. It has been rich in such production, and its capabilities are not exhausted. Paul chose for his traveling companion and his intimate friend an African. Paul was also mistaken for an African, y'all. I'm just taking a pause right here, but Paul was also mistaken for an Egyptian, right? The Roman soldier said, "Art thou not that Egyptian?" Paul said, "No, I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews." But Paul was a Roman citizen and he was speaking in Greek. Paul spoke in Greek and Hebrew. And that's why it was so That's why the Roman soldier was taken aback. Like, ain't you that Egyptian? How is it that you speaking Greek? But I digress. But it says Paul companion, his intimate friend, African. Paul also looked like that African too, y'all, because the Jews or the Yahudim, or the Israelites, looked like Africans. They were Africans. Israel is in northeast Africa. Specifically, the plate, the African tectonic plate, does not um the okay. So it's split, right? So the tectonic plate, it goes through Israel. So it splits between the African plate and the Arabian plate. Half of Israel sits on the Arabian plate, but Jerusalem in that half sits on the African plate, right? So I do have to give a disclaimer. Not the whole land of Israel sits on the African tectonic plate. Half of it does, but Jerusalem specifically does, while the other half sits on the Arabian plate. Um, so yeah, Israelites are Africans. They came out of Africa. The origin of our nation was in Africa, and we dwelled in Africa, right? And we fled to Africa. But again, let me finish. Paul's master chose the same that some of the first and brightest ornaments and most efficient agents and teachers of the early Christian church should be men of the same kindred and color. Yeah, the suffering Yeshua chose that he who should perform for him the last act of kindness on earth, who shall bear with him his cross up to the hill of Calvary, should be an African. So this is basically just talking about the African presence in the Bible. Disciples that were named niggers or niggers. Um, Also, like the bishops, like the Bishop of Carthage, had woolly hair or crisp hair and a thick lip, like the Africans do, right? Or the quote unquote Africans. Because one thing we have to remember, y'all, and as we go further, we have to get rid of a lot of these misconceptions and myths about race. Race is not a real thing, right? Um, I love this book written by J.A. Rogers called Nature Knows No Color Lines, because this is the thing. You can have people of the same nation where one of them will be heavily melanated and the other one will be heavily pale. That happens because people mix, right? That's been going on since Babel. That's been going on since the time of the Tower of Babel. There's been mixing that's been going on. It's no different from today. So especially when you're talking about Africans, and let's just even stay just specifically West Africans, you have different tribes in West Africa, that have different phenotypes, have different skin tones, have different hair textures. You have, let's say, okay, let's take for example, you got the Igbos who are more. Now you have some dark Igbos, but a lot of Igbos are more brown and more, lighter skin, than let's say the Ashanti or the Akan people who are more darker in skin versus say like those in Senegal who are very black, who are jet black, in Senegal and Guinea. But then you also have people like the Fulani who are more lighter skin, with more Ethiopian looking features. You see what I'm saying? So you have different phenotypes, and this is what I try to get people out of this. Oh, well, that's African. Well, what's African? Africa is the most diverse continent in the world. You have many different tribes in Africa who, okay, yeah, they might all be melanated, but they all have different phenotypes, and they all have different hair textures, and they all have different facial features and genetic makeup. So what are you saying? African. There's no one image for Africa. Africa is diverse. Even West Africa is diverse. We don't all look the same. You see what I'm saying? Even all black people in America don't look the same. You got some who got more short, wide noses. You got some who got more sharper noses. You got a lot of us who got bigger lips, and you got a lot of us who don't have such bigger lips. You got some of us who might be jet black, and you got some of us who might be red. You got some of us who have the nappiest of the nappy hair, and you got some of us who have straighter or curly hair, right? So we're diverse. We have to get out of this whole notion of, oh, that's African. But for the sake of this, I digress. I understand what this author is trying to say. Basically, the African presence or the black presence in the Bible. But they're also discrediting that these Israelites were also black too. But next source. Black Jews in Africa, How the Hebrews Became Jews by Jose Malcion. I'm just going to read the highlighted portion. The Hebrews of North and West Africa, particularly Ethiopia, are Phalashim. They settled from Morocco to Angola. Oh, wow. From Morocco to Angola. It's saying the Falasha Jews, or the Hebrews, particularly of North, East, and West Africa, but particularly the Ethiopian, are Phalashim. They settled from Morocco to Angola. Isn't that crazy? All right, I'm gonna read some more of it too. Most of them have been absorbed into other tribes. The Hebrews of India are called Cochin. They are supposed to. I'm sorry, y'all. That word is blocked out. I'm gonna skip over that part. Um, but it's saying basically what it's saying is that they supposedly came from Portugal in 1523 and went to India. The Cochin Jews did. This native element, black Jews, was later reinforced by new immigrants, white Jews from Syria, Turkey, etc. So those black Jews who went to India, who are called Cochin, um, you know, they uh, there also came white Jews after them, right? So, but there were black Jews who are in India called Cochin who came from Portugal and Spain. Again, we're gonna get more into Portugal and Spain later. But I'm gonna finish this source. King John of Portugal deported great numbers of black Jews to the African island of Sao Tome or San Tome near Nigeria and Cameroon. Like I said, this is a smoking gun. Sao Tome specifically. Sao Tome is gonna be a smoking gun. And you'll see why I say that later, but I'm not gonna get ahead of myself. Here we have a map, right? I highlighted right over here. Kingdom of Judah or Weta, the slave coast. Now, I know a lot of people, Weta has been a hot topic in the past few years, when this source has been brought out, or this map has been brought out that said the Kingdom of Judah. You even had black people go over to Weta, where they practicing voodoo or voodoo and ask, the voodoo priest, hey, the Jews live here. Like somebody who lived there in 2023 gonna know who lived there in 1619. You know what I'm saying? All they know is, they might have oral history, but you got to also remember this was a slave coast. A lot of these inhabitants were taken, and you had enemy tribes who had came and settled into this place right here called Weta. But just to reinforce that Weta or the kingdom of Judah, that Weta means Judah, and that the inhabitants were the Jews. Let's go to this next source right here. This is a French source. The source is Society. I ain't gonna try to speak that, but y'all see it and y'all can look it up. It's written in 1890. This is the French version right here, and this is the English translation. So the English translation of this French is Weta, Fida, Hueda, Weta, Judah, or Judah is a city old, frequented since the 16th century by Portuguese slavers who gave it its name. Then its inhabitants were said to be Judaquis, or Jews. Judaquis means Jews. And they were indeed considered to be a remnant of scattered tribes of Israel. To the north, the Alala River, whose real name is Ephra, had become Euphrates for scholars. So these inhabitants of Weta, the slave coast, where a lot of the slaves were taken from, were said to be Jews. So I'm gonna leave it right there for today, y'all. My battery dying. I know y'all see that, but I just wanted to kind of give y'all more. We'll pick up on Weta and we'll pick up on Spain and Portugal when we come back. But I just wanted to kind of break that down for y'all, and do a little breakdown for y'all today on this lovely Shabbat, because I know I owe y'all one. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. And we're gonna continue to, do what we do, and we're gonna break down these sources. And in my comments, either you source up or shut up, or you come correct, because I ain't with that. You feel me? So don't come over here playing, because we ain't playing. Either source up or shut up. And if you get in here talking ignorant, you're gonna be blocked. So with that, I just want to say all praise to the Most High Yah. I just want to say all praise to Yahushua HaMashiach, our Master, our Savior as well, who is going to be coming back for us who have been lost and scattered to the four corners of the earth. So with that, I just want to say Shabbat Shalom, Shalom, Salam, however you say it, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.